Hey, yo, one last video. Um, you'll excuse me if it all looks the same. And I'm repping Snot Rocket. I love these guys. They're so amazing. Just the name alone. I know I've already said it. I didn't know what a Snot Rocket was until I was in like my late 20s. So it's adorable to have this little munchkin who's my good friend Eamon's son, who came up with it. I think he's 8. I don't know, 7. He's just a wonderful little punk in the best way. Anyhow, so I kind of want to do a bit of a story time, which was 2 things. Wow, that's weird. 2 things and maybe a third that I'll get to. One was I was doing some work in a closed, like you gotta do your ID to go in. And I have the bad habit of smoking cigarettes, okay? Mind you, I'm aware it's bad. I'm fully aware. I understand. It's a horrible habit. I'm trying to drop it. Separate conversation, but somewhat relevant. So I'm having a cigarette on my lunch break. Like, did 4 or 5 hours of work. I just had lunch, having a smoke. And there's the sidewalk, and then there's the other side, which is where my car is parked. And I'm on the other side of my car. And technically, there's no sidewalk there. Now, people sometimes, occasionally walk by. It's not my first time there. But, like, I'm not near a sidewalk. I'm on the other side of my car. I'm just sitting down having a smoke. And I'm having a cigarette. And this lady walks by. And she does the, so gross. Excuse me, it's so rude. And I'm like, okay, I'm sorry. You can walk on the other side of the road. And apparently that was enough to, like, set her off. So she, while continuing to walk her dog, proceeds to like kind of at me. And I'm like countering back her things that she's saying. And finally I leave it with just like, okay, have a nice day. Because she's not going to stop and have a conversation. She's not going to like try to continue anything. And then presumably her husband, who I had witnessed on a bicycle, dude on the bicycle, who presumably was her husband, which, by the way, it's just super weird if your significant other is walking the dog and you're rolling along with her on a bicycle. It's very weird. Just go for a walk with your significant other. Why are you on the bicycle? I understand exercise on the bicycle, whatever. Maybe he's got knee things and he can't walk. I doubt it. He didn't seem that old. He seemed like he was in his mid-60s. Anyways, he rolls on over to me and is like, I heard that you were attacking my wife. You were saying things about her. And I was like, no, I wasn't. I was just having a smoke, and she criticized me having a smoke, and I suggested she could go on the other side of the street. He was like, oh, well, we own this property. And I was like, no, you don't. This is publicly owned. Like, if anyone, because it is a closed environment, everyone. And he just ranted about like, well, we paid for our things, our contributing money in the stuff. And I was like, okay, so what? And he's like, yeah, I used to smoke myself. And I was like, okay, cool. Do you remember when smoking was like allowed in bars and things like that? It wasn't that long ago. Yeah, but the democracy has said smoking is bad. And I was like, okay, we're in a republic, not a democracy. And second of all, it doesn't really matter. I'm just smoking here, minding my own business. So it was like weird because he wasn't really articulating his point. I felt like he was trying to defend his woman. And it's like, it's fine. And then on my hand, I'm like, I don't understand the point. Like, perhaps what I said was not as polite as it should have been. But the point is valid, which is like, look, I was standing in a certain location. She saw at 50 feet before she got to me, and she could have circumvented me and avoided the smoke. But instead of doing that, she opted to whine and complain about traversing my area of smoke. Now, okay, that's her prerogative. It's just like, and then what was weird is that the husband was trying to infer that he's going to take a photo of my car and get me in trouble. And fortunately, the owner of the house who I've been working for and been doing a lot of work for was like, no, this is my guest. He's not just some worker. He's my guest. Like, leave him alone. Fuck off. Sorry about the language. But, and that was it. That was the end of the story. It was fine. And it was so interesting. And frankly, I don't think I handled it correctly. But I don't think I handled it wrong. I think on one end of the spectrum, I could have just ignored her, right? And just, it would have been a non-issue. On another end of the spectrum, I could have been apologetic, which I normally am. I normally am known for over-apologizing for things. So that was what was extra fascinating. Is like, normally I'm the guy who's like, I'm so sorry for inconveniencing you. But in this thing, I just got hit the wrong way. And I was like, no, I'm not going to apologize. I'm not intentionally inconveniencing you. I usually go out of my way to not inconvenience people when I'm smoking because I know it smells. You, this lady, you're going out of your way to be inconvenienced. That's on you. You do not deserve an apology from me. So, yeah. Okay. And then the second part, sorry, it's just the shading is like so weird. The second part is, and this is my fault. So there's the neighbor right back there. And there's like a dog run really right here. And I blocked it off, but I didn't account for my dog being able to jump over. So what ended up happening, so before I blocked it off, but I didn't like secure it as well as I could have. And what ended up happening is one of my dogs, both of them actually, got over there, and I have a German Shepherd, and he's like barking at this pug on the other side. And it's like loose chicken wire, like this much space. Okay. And he's barking up a storm. And frankly, the chicken wire, sorry, height wise, it's like 3 feet tall, maybe 4 feet. So interestingly enough, my dog is barking at this pug on the other side of chicken wire. And the pug gets close enough to the chicken wire. I don't really know because I wasn't there for it. But he basically bit and grabbed the pug on the neck. I had to take the pug to surgery. I didn't. The neighbor did. And it was like $800 because vets are retardedly expensive. You think medical bills are expensive? They are. Vet bills are way more. Not way more. They're just surprisingly expensive. Let me put it that way. And maybe it's because we as humans, we're like, we understand. We have to heal our body. But like, $800 for a bunch of stitches is ridiculous. Whatever. So I contributed $200 and I offered to pay more. And they're like, no, $200 is fine. Our grandma is affluent. So not a problem. Weird that they like throw in that part, but whatever. So there's like grandma and then like 2 daughters, maybe 3 daughters, 1, 2, 3 daughters. And then other people who live there too occasionally or show up. I don't really know. Don't care. Doesn't matter. So on this particular day, I had secured a barrier that was like 4.5, 5 feet tall, whatever. And they're there and it's on the weekend. And then my dog's over the edge and they're screaming. And I happen to be outside. And I secured it with screws, so I can't easily unscrew the thing. I'm outside, I have my screw gun. So I have to hop over, which is great. Got a nice little scratch for that. And my dog doesn't have an animal under his thing, but is like confronting their animals again. So it's like a big thing again, right? Okay, fudge. And what's interesting is and my other dog got over because he's like, well, if Big Brother can get over, then I can get over. He gets over too. So now I'm trying to hold 2 medium-sized aggressive dogs who are effectively trying to protect me and mine. And they're yelling at me. Not just they, like, not grandma, but, you know, her child, and then her child's child, who's very much dyed hair, leftist liberal. And they're basically calling me out like I'm a horrible person and I don't maintain this fence and yada, yada, yada. And we haven't had problems for years. We've been here for years. Now, here's the thing I take umbrage with. In many respects, they're correct. Like, I've only been living here for 2 years. I don't know all the ins and outs of this property, and frankly, it's not my responsibility to build a fence. Now, I understand their perspective, which is like, your dogs are aggressive, and if messes with our small dogs, and I'm like, okay, then if you're worried about the defense of your small dogs, then maybe you should build a fence, which was kind of my point, and they didn't like that. And they're just like, well, we haven't had problems with the other people who have lived here. And I'm like, okay, things change. So it's an interesting phenomena of like, whose responsibility is it to build a fence? Now, I have subsequently elevated, so it's now like 8-9 feet of fence in between that area, so my dogs cannot get there at all. So that's fine. There was a harsh word that I called the leftist pink-haired chick. I called her a bitch, and I regret that. And I apologized to her several times, and then apologized to her boyfriend or husband or whatever several times. And her mom was there for the apology, and I guess her brother or whatever. So like, I apologize for what I said. What was interesting to me is that I kept being name called and aggressed towards as if I was totally at fault for everything, and there was like no responsibility on their end for the fence. And I find this a fascinating thing, which is like, if you have two properties, right, you have an in-between line, one could make an argument that both parties are responsible for the fence. Now, since I build fences and work and do stuff, I'm under the impression, I understand that oftentimes one side's like, I want a fence, and they just build a fence. And the other side has nothing to do with it. They're not contributing. They have no say, whatever. They get the ugly side of the fence, basically, because they don't want anything to do with it. Now, sometimes it's the opposite, where it's like they do want to contribute. They want a different color fence, or they want to do, they're paying for half of it or whatever. And in my universe, it makes sense if there's going to be a fence built on your property. If one party wants a fence, it makes sense to me to contribute to that fence building. So that's kind of one part, is like, look, a fence is both parties' responsibility. The border of your land is both parties' responsibility. If both parties are unwilling to handle it, okay, then when things happen, things are going to happen because both parties are unwilling to handle it. However, in this case, it's like they've been living in a world where they don't need to upgrade the fence that's been there for like 80 years or 30 years. I don't know, a long time. Decades and decades and decades. So they're like, oh, everything's fine, and not adapting to new things. And they're not wrong where it's like, oh, you have scary dogs. That's, I get that. But also, I'm only renting. It's not really my responsibility to do that. But like, I did my limited responsibility of like, cool, I'll stop my dogs from doing that and contribute to her thing. So it's weird. Part of me wants to take full responsibility. It's my fault for not training my dogs better and things like that, because in a way that is true. The other part of me is like, I don't like that people like this exist, where instead of having a conversation, they want to elevate it to this whole other thing with your neighbor. Like, this is a person who lives right next door to you. Why don't you just leave a note on their door saying, would like to have a conversation over the phone or in person or whatever? Instead, it has to be this whole other thing. Now, obviously, the circumstance, I understand that. But then afterwards, like, now, frankly, I don't hope to live here very much longer. I'm hoping to be out before the birth of my son in April. But if that doesn't happen, maybe at some point it's like I have to establish relationships. I thought I did, but apparently I have to establish new relations. But I don't really want to. These people who voted the opposite of me, I don't agree with them politically. I don't seem to get along with them in general. I did before, and then this thing happened, and being called things like, they called my wife a whore, which was like super weird and not relevant. It felt like it was like a clap back because of what I said, but it was also like she's not here to defend herself. Like, why are you including her? The fuck? Anyhow, I just think that it's obviously better for us all to treat each other and each other's neighbor as if it's a friend that you rarely talk to. Because a lot of people don't talk to their neighbors. So you should treat them as such. You should treat them like a friend that you aren't in tremendous communication with, and be like, hey, blah, 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 this and that and whatever. I think it'd be much better if we got back to the point where people knew who their neighbors were and communicated with them. So if something's happening in the neighborhood, they can all kind of contribute to the safety and well-being of the neighborhood. That being said, I don't think I handle myself correctly at all. And I probably, and after reassessing it through this thing, it'd be better if I go over and apologize. It is annoying that I have to do that. But frankly, that's probably the correct thing to do. Anyways, that's it for now. 5 men out. Love you all.